A cabinet minister in the Morrison government is facing demands for a police investigation into whether his office was involved in forging a fake document to attack Sydney's Lord Mayor.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And what a cracker of a yarn that is. The mysterious tale of the dodgy document at the centre of a grubby political hit job with help from the media. And how do we learn about it? From Anne Davis and Christopher Norse in The Guardian last Wednesday.
Angus Taylor baselessly accused Sydney's Lord Mayor of driving up carbon emissions by spending $15 million on travel, a claim that was later backed up with a doctored council document provided to the Daily Telegraph.
So how did the Minister and the Daily Telegraph get themselves in this mess? Well, it all began back in June when Sydney's Lord Mayor Clover Moore declared a climate emergency. Clover wrote to state and federal ministers to inform them of that declaration and got a letter back from the Federal Minister for Emissions Reduction with some helpful, if patronising, advice.
You might be interested to know that there are many practical ways local councils can take real and meaningful action to reduce their carbon emissions. One such example is to limit unnecessary air travel. Given your most recent annual report shows your council spent $1.7 million on international travel and $14.2 million on domestic travel, there is a real opportunity for your council to make a meaningful contribution to reducing Australia's emissions.
Remarkably, the Daily Telegraph also received a copy of that letter. And even more remarkably, it received it before the Lord Mayor and Sydney City Council had even seen it. And not surprisingly, the telly splashed the story on page 3 the very next day.
Exclusive. Clover's climate conflict heats up.
Lord Mayor Clover Moore has been told by the federal government to rein in the hundreds of thousands of dollars her council is spending on international and domestic travel if she is serious about lecturing Australia on climate change. In his letter, Mr Taylor claims the council spent more than $15 million on domestic and international travel.
The Mayor's media team had assured the journalist those numbers were wrong. And Anna Caldwell, the telly's state political editor, all but conceded that in her story. But it didn't stop the paper from publishing the minister's false accusations, and it certainly didn't stop the usual suspects from jumping all over it. First with Alan Jones at breakfast.
Clover Moore has been told to put her money where her mouth is when it comes to climate change.
Then Chris Kenny at lunchtime.
Full marks to Federal Energy Minister Angus Taylor, who's fired a broadside at one of the loopier city councils in the country.
So, was it all based on a lie? In a word, yes. The council's latest annual report, available on its website, shows spending of just $1,700 on overseas travel last year, not $1.7 million, as the minister claimed. And $4,200 was spent on domestic travel, which is less than 0.03% of Angus Taylor's figure of $14.2 million. Having checked the real figures, Clover Moore duly wrote back to the minister last week to tell him,
"These travel costs are grossly inaccurate. The Daily Telegraph published the inaccurate figures, and its journalists allege that your office provided a document containing the false information."
And here is that Word document with the false information, supplied to the Telegraph by the minister's office after the story was published to back up his claims. And while the words are the same, there are very different numbers from the council's version. In short, it looks to be a forgery. Angus Taylor has now apologised to Moore, admitting the figures were wrong, but he denies his office had anything to do with it. As he told Parliament last week,
"The document was drawn from the City of Sydney website and it was publicly available. Now, I reject the bizarre suggestions and assertions being peddled by those opposite."
Sydney City Council flatly denies that the altered document came from its website and has the metadata to prove it. Meanwhile, Labor is demanding a police inquiry to uncover the answer. And the Daily Telegraph has turned on its informant, telling readers on Friday,
Angus can't handle the truth. Ministers flying facts.
So, should the telly have published in the first place, given that the figures were so wildly inflated and the council was adamant they were wrong? And should it have written this editorial that repeated the minister's false claims unchallenged? A Telegraph spokesperson told Media Watch that the letter was newsworthy and it accurately reported the dispute.
The Daily Telegraph thoroughly interrogated Mr Taylor's office and Ms Moore's office, and as a result, the story published carried both of their claims. The Daily Telegraph could not have foreseen, when it was questioning both parties, that a federal minister would be relying on what has this week been found by the council to be an altered document.
The Telly adds it has now corrected the record on the figures and is, quote, pursuing all leads to find out how it was misled. It also told Media Watch it will cooperate fully with any police investigation. But, strangely, the government is in no hurry to have one. And that brings us to the wider point in all this, which is that some journalists are facing the threat of jail for reporting on government leaks, while others are being fed leaks by government ministers to smear political opponents. And the government shows no interest in investigating that. It is an ugly business, and some in the media are complicit. But now, to what Australians cannot get enough of, the gold, glitter and glamour of reality TV.
Aaron and Daniela. With a total judges score of 27 out of 30, you are the House Rules champions for 2017.
The winners of Channel 7's renovation blockbuster House Rules walked away with $200,000 in prize money, and this month sold their home for $1.2 million, up from $730,000 just 3 years ago. But what happens to those who are cast as the villains? That same year, Nicole Prince and her best friend Fiona Taylor went on the same show and got promos like this.
You give someone a brand new house. You think they'd be grateful.
I hate it.
Now, it's them versus everyone.
Being hated is not so much fun. And as the website TV Black Box revealed last week in a landmark decision, Nicole Prince has won workers' compensation from Seven for psychological injury, including depression, anxiety and PTSD, resulting from her appearance on the show. So, what were her complaints? First, that in the programme, Seven portrayed her and her friend Fiona Taylor as bullies.
Ooh, do not cross the line. You know we're going to get shit for that, don't you?
It's us against the world this week, and I think we've made it very clear that no one is going to stand in our way.
Second, Prince complained that the show's producers edited the footage so it showed only negative comments about the other team's renovation work and none of the positives.
It's a car grill. In the hallway. It actually looks like a junk shop.
Hanging from your ceiling.
Yeah.
You feel like it's going to fall down on your head every time you walk past.
And third, Prince complained viewers took to Channel 7's Facebook page to abuse them online, and Seven did nothing to stop them. And sure enough, on the official House Rules Facebook page last week, we found hundreds of comments like this.
Those moaning cows who have done nothing but complain and put down each and every other contestant. Sorry, you have dug your own grave.
Can't wait to watch this ungrateful, horrible woman fail.
As one fellow contestant summed it up at the time...
I don't know whether you realise, but you're Australia's most hated women.
Prince also told the Workers' Compensation Commission, which is where the case was heard, that Seven's treatment of her had ruined her life.
After my episode aired, I wanted to kill myself, and I started drinking more alcohol in an attempt to self-medicate my injury. I have not been able to obtain work and have been informed this was due to how I was portrayed as a bully.
Seven argued that Prince was not an employee and it had no control over the hateful social media comments. But last month, in a scathing judgment, the Commission came down in favour of the former reality TV star, finding that she was placed in a hostile and adversarial environment, that Seven failed to take down the hateful social media posts about her and her teammate, and that it was guilty of selective editing so as to...
portray them in a certain negative light.
But Nicole Prince is not the only reality roadkill in the race for ratings. Other casualties include the Bachelorette's David Whitcoe, who claims his modelling work dried up as soon as this episode went to air.
I think you actually made a mountain out of a molehill.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Jackass.
And appearing in the documentary Creating a Monster, Whitcoe told a similar story to Prince of good deeds being edited out.
When we first introduced ourselves and all the guys brought her like a little present, I actually donated to Beyond Blue, which is a charity that helps with depression, and I told her about that, but they cut that out as well.
And who can forget former Married at First Sight contestant Dean Wells, who was branded as a sexist and a cheater and scored promos like this.
A lot of guys are just afraid to be men now, and they're just getting whipped by their women.
After the series was over, Dean Wells argued he was not the man that Nine had made him out to be.
I never said the word obey. I would never say the word obey. I believe that women can have their own careers, do whatever they want. That's nothing to do with what I was talking about.
Many will have little sympathy for anyone who appears on reality TV and then complains about the way they come across. And Seven has appealed, so the ruling could still be overturned. But if it stands, it means that networks do have a duty to look after the health of contestants. And that should ring alarm bells for producers, because more of these ersatz villains could seek redress. As former 9 and 10 producer Rob McKnight told Media Watch,
this could really open the floodgates for legal action, and that will dramatically change what we see at home. The hero versus villain narrative will most likely be toned down.
But probably not toned down too much, because as McKnight also told Media Watch, without the drama, you don't have a show. So, if you're thinking of putting your life in the spotlight, it'd be wise to remember that your every move will be tracked. Nicole Prince's contract said she must not remove her microphone at any time. And if she wanted to go to the toilet, she had to inform the sound recordist. As McKnight told Media Watch,
these shows film all day and night in the hope of catching that 5 minutes of the day where you are angry, upset or just losing the plot. Think about the worst 5 minutes you experienced today. Would you want that broadcast to the nation?
It's a high price to pay for 15 minutes of fame. And talking of fame and demonising celebrities, let's take a look at NW magazine, which loves telling its readers that the world's most famous female stars are miserable and starving.
Heartbroken Nicole, just skin and bones.
Yikes.
That picture of Kidman on the cover and inside was taken at last month's Toronto International Film Festival, and she certainly was looking slim. But dozens of photos of her were taken that day in the same black dress, and she looks fabulous and healthy in nearly all of them. NW, of course, picked one that made her look the skinniest. The previous week, NW did a similar hit job on Angelina Jolie.
Angel's hunger strike.
Skeletal star down to just 35 kilos.
Shock new pics.
That photo and others inside were taken at the recent LA premiere of Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, where most of the pics show Angelina looking stunning. But once again, NW chose a bad one and then had their art department make it worse, adding shadows on her neck, giving her a bigger head and adding contrast that makes her look gaunt. Another favourite is Miley Cyrus.
Wild Miley's
deadly divorce diet.
She's just 40 kilos.
Just like Kidman and Jolie, Miley is supposedly wasting away because her personal life is a wreck. But that photo of Cyrus is from the MTV Video Music Awards in August, and if you compare it to the original from Getty, you can see it's had a few tweaks too. Her stomach has been flattened, ribs shaded, and her arm trimmed out. And she's even been given a new hand from her Glastonbury performance. Yet another regular NW victim is Katie Holmes, who was on the cover a few weeks before.
Heartbroken Katie.
Wasting away.
Shock pics.
Just like the others, Katie is starving after relationship troubles. Just look at those bags and hollow cheeks. Except that that picture is 4 years old from a movie set where Katie was portraying a struggling single mother. NW has a long and nasty track record of this stuff, of course, and we've called them out for it in the past, for giving Holmes pimples, for making Lily Allen look starving and struggling with extra shading, and making Angelina Jolie look crazy. So, why do they do it? Painting these stars as sad zombie skeletons and lying about them to their mostly female readership. Presumably because it helps sell mags at a time when they're more and more irrelevant. As Georgina Dent, a former associate editor of Mamma Mia, told Media Watch,
the very clear imputation is that ultimately any woman's worth is judged by her weight and relationship status. Hidden beneath the faux sincerity and concern for the women pictured is cruelty. It is tantamount to bullying and promotes a toxic and tired one-dimensional narrative about women. It seems they are merely collateral damage in the quest to make a sale.
So, what do the people who serve up this trash every week have to say for themselves? Nothing at all. NW editor Sebastian van der Zwaan, seen here on his Instagram, not starving or struggling, refused to comment, as did Bauer magazines. But it appears that featuring desperate and skeletal celebrities on the cover is not bringing rewards. NW readership in the last 12 months to June, according to Roy Morgan, was down by 17.4% to 140,000. And in other news from the world of mags, Bauer last week took over Pacific magazines, which owns New Idea, Who, Marie Claire, and That's Life, among others. So it'll now be able to apply its high editorial standards to even more of your favourite titles. Watch out. That's all from us. You can read more on our website, including a full statement for the Daily Telegraph. And don't miss Media Bites on Thursday on your favourite social media platform. But for now, until next week, goodbye.